I'm Paul.
I'm Hugh.
Welcome to the Week in Westworld. Okay, so we kick off this week with kind of straight from what was at the end of the last episode, which is Dolores and co have sent a train into the tunnel. They've smashed their way through to the previously unseen by them kind of underground chambers of Westworld and so on.
Yeah, the Mesa, I think it's called.
Why is it called that?
I don't know, and I assume it will be a very complicated reason. But that's pretty much where all the action takes place this week, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
We jump around a little bit, but pretty much everything's in the Mesa. We see the sort of Delos toughs trying to defend Charlotte while she gets the control unit out of Abernathy, and we see Dolores and co, those guys bust in and they do that cool double cross.
Because it looks like it's very easy to begin with, doesn't it, for these guys, the crack team, to be taking out Dolores' guys because they just bang like it's a computer game, and then they come across that pile of bodies, and suddenly they realise that's their men, and stepping out the shadows is Dolores and co and Teddy. And they just blow them away, don't they? They
do, and it's pretty much a clean sweep. And at the same time as all that's happening, we've got Bernard downstairs in the cradle who is chatting to Ford for the first time in quite a while. I mean,
so the end of last episode, we saw him kind of reflected in the piano. He was playing the piano in the saloon in Sweetwater, but in the cradle.
Yes.
And this is what we're going to talk about in a minute, is how confusing this is getting again.
Getting so confusing.
And so they're chatting, and he's showing him round, and he's kind of revealing to him a lot of things about the purpose of the park and so on, but we can talk about that in a bit. But it just becomes, so everything is happening in a similar timeline. There are sort of several timelines within a really small amount of space, aren't there? Which I find more confusing than when we've had things that are definitely in the past. Like you.
It's a bit confusing. I mean, this episode's mostly it's that we sort of have Bernard and all those guys in the furthest forward timeline discovering all the robot Bernards, thus them discovering Bernard is a host, and then we sort of jump back to this whole Mesa battle thing, which is in the past, and most of that's pretty much happening at the same time, and then we jump back at the end to hanging out with Bernard and Charlotte in the future again.
But anyway, multiple Bernards. So it seems to me that there's several ways that this episode has now made us look back at the past and go, how much of that was true? What did we know was really going on there? One of them is we've got multiple Bernards. One of them is that we've kind of expanded on that idea from last episode that Dolores is testing Bernard in some of those scenes that we've seen from the past, not the other way around necessarily.
Yeah, because Falk basically explicitly says that, doesn't he? We used Dolores to kind of make you work.
Yeah, and then we know that there's the cradle where things can seem real to those who are in there and to those who are being shown them. And so, maybe some of the stuff we've seen in the past was set in the cradle.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, there's lots of stuff making you question the past again, I think.
And it's interesting as well that when we do have those scenes with Bernard and Ford, we kind of have Ford explaining a lot of what's going on in Westworld and what Westworld's for. We kind of get the Facebook Cambridge Analytica thing we talked about before, the data mining, is a bit more complicated. It's sort of to do with experimenting and using the hosts to work out what people are going to do.
There's another. We now know what the reason is, don't we? And it's all about, as we expected, it's about for people chasing immortality, trying to create new bodies for themselves that they can kind of insert their consciousnesses into. But to do that, they have to. Well, the tech isn't quite there yet, is it? And so actually, what they were doing when they were gathering all that data from people coming into the parks, they were looking at those people against the controls of the hosts and sort of getting more and more data about how people would behave in these situations so that they can tweak and improve the kind of the tech that they'll have for putting your consciousness in there. So that was the kind of it was bigger than just data gathering, which is nice because that seemed a bit of a
what kind of cowboy hats would people choose? It's still, I'm not sure if, I think I kind of have to mentally squint at that to make that make sense, because I'm still not sure if that, I feel like there's better ways to do that than have a magic cowboy park. But
maybe. But anyway, I mean, so we've learned quite a lot, and also loads of things have been thrown into question as well. Brilliant. Thanks, Westworld, as usual.
We're going to sort of keep things short this week, but we're going to sort of cut through to an in memoriam section.
Yeah.
Because it was quite a bloody episode. Obviously, Clementine was brought down by Delos fire. Angela kind of seduced the most gullible man in the world and then blew herself up and destroyed the cradle. And Lawrence finally got taken down by the man in black again, who himself was shot about 65 times by various people when he tried to confront Maeve. Maeve, in turn, shot about 12 times. These are very specific measurements. And yeah, so neither of them are looking in good shape. I mean, it's kind of, you believe that Maeve could survive and get fixed. The man in black is about a 70-year-old man who's been shot like so many times. I'm not sure how he's still going.
I think is it the whiskey?
It's all the whiskey. It's all the whiskey.
Yeah, but I mean, for me, it's quite sad to see Clementine finally go. I mean, you know, as a host, you can't. I know, but I mean, I guess one of the things we should say first is the stakes are now higher for hosts.
That's a good point. I hadn't even considered that.
With the cradle destroyed,
that's the backups.
That's all their backups. Now, Dolores sees this as a positive thing. She sees it as setting them free because those backups are to sort of kind of take them back to their old personalities, and so they're not free. What we don't really know as yet is, does that confer mortality on them?
Yeah, you've got to kind of assume it does, and that kind of is a great point in the series, because at the moment it's like, you know, they get shot, we can fix them up, but now there's almost parity, isn't there? Like the host can take a bit more damage.
That's always been missing from one of the things that supposedly makes you human has always been missing from the host is mortality.
Yeah.
So yeah, but then their physical bodies and brains and so on, and they can be fixed. So I'm not. I guess get if that's
if you're not you though. I mean, look at Teddy. I mean, that's a person. He's physically there. He's still is Teddy alive? I mean, he's just basically roaming around doing Dolores' bidding.
It's true.
It's like, is that even him? Can we count that?
But he does know that she did that to him. He made that clear in the last episode, and so to me there is some personality continuing through. But yeah, it's a point for debate, definitely.
And final person who may or may not be alive or dead is Dr. Ford, who obviously we talked about earlier, and now he's sort of hitched a ride in Bernard's consciousness and is making him do all sorts of terrible things. We finally found out what that little dream sequence of the machine gunning was.
Yeah, Bernard machine gunning from the first ever series trailer, I think it was, lighting up with the flashes of machine gun fire.
That was Ford making do it.
It was Ford making do it in this episode.
Yeah. And Ford's managed to save himself again in the, you know, the backups have been destroyed, so if he'd stayed there he would be dead.
We presume it is Ford having hitched a ride rather than just Bernard hallucinating and finding a way to do the things he wants to do.
That's a good point. But we'll find out in future weeks.
Yeah.
That's all we have time for this week in Westworld, but we'll be back soon, and in the meantime,
head over to radiotimes.com for more Westworld and other delicious content.
Goodbye.